Hello and welcome to the first episode of my quest project, and I will be talking about the Olympian Goddesses. Now, the Olympian Goddesses consist of Athena, Hera, Aphrodite, Artemis, and Demeter. We're going to start with Athena. She was the goddess of wisdom, war, and artisans. She was the favorite daughter of Zeus. She was a virgin goddess, that's notable. The patron goddess of heroes. She was associated with owls. Athens was named in her honor, and she's the Roman Minerva. Now, there are two stories of her birth that are very similar. However, the backstory to them and the way she comes out differs. In the more well-known story, Zeus has this really, really bad headache, and he's begging Hephaestus. He's like, take an axe to my head. It hurts so much. So Hephaestus cracks his skull open, and out pops Athena, fully grown, fully dressed in armor. The other makes more sense with how Hephaestus was born, where Zeus swallowed Athena's mother, and then Athena just kind of popped out of his head. And that works because the whole story of Hephaestus' birth is that he was born in retaliation for Athena, like Zeus had Athena himself, so Hera wanted to have somebody else herself. As I said, she's associated with owls and then associated with olive branch because when she was competing with Poseidon for patronage of Athens, she gave them the olive branch and Poseidon gave them this beautiful spring. Now, Pallas is sort of an epithet of Athena, which means another type of name. And Pallas, essentially, the main story is that Athena and Pallas were sparring when they were kids. Pallas was the daughter of a giant, and they were sparring, and Athena accidentally, fatally wounded her. And then she took on the name of Pallas in tribute to her friend. That's the story I can think of off the top of my head that I know is right. Nike, often associated with Athena because Athena is the goddess of more strategic war, and Nike is the goddess of victory. And Athena Nike is like her own goddess and her own thing. But Nike is also her own thing. That is an image of winged victory, actually, at the Louvre. Just something really interesting. Now, some of the aspects of Athena were given to the Virgin Mary. None that I can think of off the top of my head, but I do know there was an association there, as well as with the Statue of Liberty. Now, these are two very famous temples of Athena, the Parthenon and the Erechtheion. The Erechtheion is where these famous statues of Athena sit, or not statues of Athena. It's these women, and I forget their names, but they're considered sisters, and one of them is at the British Museum, and she's standing alone in a corner. It's very sad. The Parthenon, very big, super well known all over the world. Really hope you can just hear that. All over the world. Now, these are three specific representations of her in art. She is on the Great Seal of California, and I just wanted to include that in there because California. In this lower corner here with the circled one, this is actually a Pompeii frieze of the fall of Troy. But specifically in this image, Cassandra is holding on to this statue of Athena, and this statue of Athena was said that as long as it was standing in this temple in Troy, as long as it was standing, Troy was safe. And when Cassandra was ripped away by this soldier, by this Greek soldier, the statue fell with her. Now, the largest image on this slide is of the Judgment of Paris, which has Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. And as time went, in the beginnings of the depiction of the Judgment of Paris, all three of these women were clothed. But as time went on, and as in this Judgment of Paris, Aphrodite wins the competition, basically, Athena and Hera are shown as clothed, and that's just something that I found really interesting. Now, essentially, with Perseus, he was famous for slaying Medusa. This is a statue at the Met in the European Sculpture Gallery of him holding Medusa's head. And Athena provided him a lot of tools on his journey to do such. And I'm forgetting the specific details, but I believe she provided him his shield, and then Hermes provided him his shoes. But she was known as a patron of heroes, and that continues with Odysseus, one of the arguably most famous instances of this. She was very Odysseus he's gonna get through this. He actually was the one who invented the Trojan horse, and he was this great inventor. He was this very smart guy, and that's I think a reason that Homer really was yes, Athena's with this guy. Now, very famous punishment myths for Athena. Medusa, Famously, she turned Medusa into the Gorgon she is, and I have a whole other part of a video on Medusa, as well as Arachne. Athena famously had a weaving competition with Arachne, and technically, like, lost. So then she turned Arachne into a spider. Moving on to Hera. Hera is the goddess of marriage and family. She is the protector of women in childbirth. She's the patron goddess of lawful marriage. She's the queen of the gods. She was swallowed by her father, and she is the Roman Juno. Now, she has a lot of kids. Ares, Enyo, Eris, Hebe, Hephaestus, Prometheus, the Charities, and a birth goddess that I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce her name. Now, Ares is the god of war. Enyo is a goddess of war. Eris is the goddess of chaos. Hebe is the goddess of youth. Hephaestus is, like, blacksmithing and invention and all those things. Prometheus famously gave fire to humans. The Charities are the goddesses of, like, goodness and light. And as I said, that birth goddess is the goddess of birth. I believe it's, like, Aletheia, if memory serves me right. Anyway, now, she has a lot of general mythology. She was famously married to Zeus, and it is said that their marriage was celebrated as, like, the model for divine marriage in festivals. She was associated with the peacock because one of the stories of peacock cuckoo, because one of the stories of her and Zeus getting together is that he transformed into a cuckoo, her favorite bird, and she took him into his lap, and then he was kind of like, hey, I'm not a bird. And then they kind of got married. Now, the famous golden apples that started the Trojan War were a gift to Hera from Gaia for her and Zeus's wedding, actually. Now, the cow's there because Homer gave her the epithet of cow-eyed, and then she was heavily associated with cows. That is, on the side there, you'll see the white Madonna lily. In Greek mythology, the story of the creation of that lily and the Milky Way is that Zeus was trying to get Hera to breastfeed Heracles, and he just kind of gave a baby to her, and she was like, okay. And then when she realized it was Heracles, she ripped him away from her breast, and that, like, spurt of milk created the Milky Way and that white Madonna lily. Jason and the Argonauts, she was involved here. Essentially, Hera just gave a lot of favor to Jason. She tried to be helpful with him throughout his journey. That's kind of it with Jason. Now, with Heracles, however, I told you the story of her breastfeeding him, ripping him away from her breast. She hated this kid with a passion. More than she typically hates children of Zeus. She hated him. One of the most famous stories is Hercules had to go on these labors because he went mad and he killed his family. Hera drove him mad, is how that went, actually. And when he was a baby, she sent 2 serpents after him to kill him. Didn't really work. And she just, like, really just kept making his life hard. Very interesting case there. Leto, oh my goodness. Leto was not a child of Zeus. She was one of Zeus's affairs. This is a statue at the Met that I recently went and saw with my friend Maddie. I made us miss an elevator so we could see it. In fact, it is her with her children. That's not the point. Hera found out that Leto was trying to give birth, and being the goddess of childbirth, she was like, nah, and she told all of these kingdoms, she was like, if you let this girl in, I'm, like, gonna smite you, if you let this girl in to give birth. So she ended up giving birth on some island that finally let her in to Apollo and Artemis. But before that, and I need to look back at my notes very quick, but I believe that Hera extended Leto's birth by upwards of 9 hours, just making it miserable for her. Now, Lamia. Lamia is a tragic story, but it is one of my favorites. She was an affair of Zeus's, and they were having children together. And Hera is kind of, she like really doesn't like Zeus's affairs at all, but when they produce an offspring, she's like, no. And she would kidnap their children, she would kill their children, she would force Lamia to kill her own children, and eventually this turned Lamia into this disfigured monster, and who would, like, kidnap children, and she's now this, like, Greek boogeyman. Callisto is a very tragic story. Essentially, Callisto was a follower of Artemis's who attracted Zeus's attention, and Zeus transformed himself into Artemis so he could sleep with Callisto. And when It was either when Artemis or when Hera found out about this, they transformed one of them transformed Callisto into a bear, and then that bear got pregnant by Zeus, ran away, got kidnapped, and then separated from her baby, and then now they're the constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. But just tragic. Io was a priestess of Hera and former princess of Argos, and she had an affair with Zeus, like many do. So Hera turned her into a cow to deter Zeus. Normally that doesn't work, but this time it did. Aphrodite, she's the goddess of love, beauty, desire, and sexuality. She's the Roman Venus. She married Hephaestus. She's the patron goddess of prostitutes and magic queens. Now, Aphrodite in art is very, very interesting because the story of her birth is that when Uranus was castrated by his son, his blood fell into the ocean, creating the Furies, while his semen, or blood, I believe, created Aphrodite. Now, she just rose from the foam. And then I believe the charities came and like dressed her, but she was alone when she rose until the charities came. There should be only about 4 figures in these depictions, and she should not be rising off of anything. Now, these are all depictions of Aphrodite's birth that I found, including the birth of Venus, a very famous painting, that all depict the opposite of what I just told you. It's just, these are beautiful paintings, but they're just not completely accurate. Now it's a sculpture in 3 paintings. This one here in the bottom right corner is personally my favorite and what I believe the most accurate depiction. These are just very accurate. They're beautiful. One of these I recently saw at the Met. It's just amazing. Now, for this next slide, I had to get my notes out. Pandemic or Pandemos versus Heavenly Urania Aphrodite. Now, these were names coined by Plato, and he essentially referred to Aphrodite as, he believed that Aphrodite was actually 2 different figures. One Aphrodite Pandemos and one Aphrodite Urania. Now, Pandemos meant for all folks. This was the more common love, as Pandemos she could be prayed to for seduction. Plato thought that Artemis Pandemos is like a younger goddess, a common Aphrodite. Now, while Aphrodite Urania is male homosexual desire, or it's like purely an occultic significance. This wasn't really like a written thing. And then later Christian interpreters of Urania thought of her as a spiritual love. Aphrodite did not have many children, actually. It was Eros, Harmonia, and Aeneas. Aeneas, Trojan soldier, I believe. Harmonia, her own story. Eros, very famous. Of course, the golden apple is on here because famously she was a key figure in the judgment of Paris. She is associated with sparrows. They were said to have driven her chariot. Cupid, Eros is there, just strong association with him, often paired together. Now, that word in the corner, but for the tides, I believe I'm saying that right. That is in general mythology rather than on its own slide, because there is a story that these 2 girls didn't properly worship Aphrodite, so Aphrodite turned them into the world's first prostitutes. I couldn't find an image of that I liked, so it is on the general mythology slide. Now, Adonis. Adonis was born, and Aphrodite was like, yes, I'm in love with that boy. Mind you, he's a baby. And she gave the baby to Persephone in like a chest or something. There was a chest involved to take care of. And then Persephone fell in love with him, and then they were like fighting over him. And then Zeus was like, yo, I got a solution. He'll spend a third of the year with you, Aphrodite, a third of the year with you, Persephone, and a third on his own hunting. He actually died hunting. Anyway, this story was thought to be written by Sappho, which is why she's included on this slide. Now, Pandora, Aphrodite, and the charities were said to have like adorned Pandora in gold, and like she was the first woman, so just like do all this stuff. Eos. Now, on the next slide, actually, let me talk about Ares first. Ares, Aphrodite was in love with Ares. She was married to Hephaestus, but she was in love with Ares. They had affairs, and there's this famous story that Hephaestus was like, I know y'all are sleeping together, so he set up a bed with a net, and they slept together, and then he like tied them up, caught them in the act, and presented them to the gods. Anyways, so Eos, before Ares and Aphrodite were ever a thing, she was in love with Ares, and like they were together, and Aphrodite was like, nuh-uh, you don't get to do that. and she cursed Eos with lust because she had once laid with Ares. So she was kind of just like constantly in love, and like sleeping with guys was Eos's deal. Now, Aphrodite had a lot of assistants, not a lot of children, but a lot of assistants. And sometimes she was thought to be the mother of these assistants because of that association. Anyways, this includes the Charities, Hebe, Dike, Peitho, Themis, Theorde, Erine, and Himeros. So many assistants. Oh my goodness. Take a moment, look at all of these statues. You'll notice they are practically the same. The reason for this is one guy in ancient Greece made this lovely statue of Aphrodite rising from bathing. Most statues, almost every statue of Aphrodite from that point onward, is a copy of that. Some form. She is rising, she's leaning and doing something with her hair. Made out of different material, but all the same concept. This is all just from the first 2 pages of the Met collection, actually. Now, moving on to Artemis. She's the goddess of the hunt, wild animals, nature, childbirth, the care of children, and chastity. She's the twin of Apollo. She's the patron of young girls and women, protectress of women in childbirth. She has a close association with the moon, which actually becomes a whole other thing. To the Romans, she is Diana, and she's most importantly a virgin goddess. Famously, as I shared earlier, Leto was her mother, this whole story of her birth, and she is thought of to be a goddess of childbirth because it is said she is older and was like born first, and then she helped her mother with Apollo. That's also partly why there's that association with the moon, is that she was like born at night and Apollo was born during the day. Moving on, general mythology, she had a pack of hunting dogs. Now, there's no depiction of this, but I do know it was a story because there's a quote of it. Artemis, how she like became a huntress and got a lot of her identity is one day when she was little, she went up to her dad and she was like, "Father, I don't want to marry. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I want to run around the woods with my girlfriends." And he was like, "Okay, that sounds chill." He gave her a bow and he was like, "You are now blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah." And she was like, "Great." And that is basically how she became a lot of what she is. Oh, this guy pissed Artemis off, and she was like, "You can reprimand this by sacrificing something to me." And he was like, "Okay." And he put his daughter up, and Artemis felt really bad. So she like switched her daughter for a deer at the last minute, and then his daughter became like a priestess, and they were chilling. Callisto, as I talked about Callisto earlier. It was either Artemis or Hera who turned her into the bear, and also she was a huntress of Artemis, and Zeus turned himself into Artemis in order to sleep with Callisto. Niobe is on here because Niobe was like, "I am a better mom than Leto because I have 7 kids and Leto has 2. Keep in mind, Niobe is simply a queen while Leto is a goddess. So then Leto was like, "Hey kids, guess what we're doing today?" to Artemis and Apollo, and they were like, "What?" And she was like, "We're gonna go murder this woman's kids." And then Artemis killed all of Niobe's 7 daughters, and Apollo killed her 7 sons. Orion, he was like a companion of Leto and Artemis, and in this version of their story I really don't like. He's like, they're like in love, Artemis and Orion, and they're like in love, and blah, blah, blah. I don't like it. I like the version where they were like simply hunting with him, and then he was like, "I can kill all of the world's animals." And he was bragging about that, and then Gaia was like, "I don't really like that." And she sent the scorpion after him that killed him, and that is why we have Orion and Scorpio in the sky. I like that version a lot. Oh, this guy was a river god who like came onto Artemis, and she was like, "No," and he didn't like that. And then he came on to a huntress of hers and tried to like marry her and kidnap her, and she did something, and the huntress was like, okay and good. This guy, he came upon either Artemis or Artemis and her huntresses bathing, and even if it wasn't on purpose, Artemis was like, "Dude," and turned him into a stag. He famously had a pack of hunting dogs, so those hunting dogs killed him because he was a stag. You can see the depiction of him finding Artemis bathing and her maidens bathing, and then I saw this and I thought it was really cool, him being killed by his dogs. Aura, you're not allowed to laugh at this slide. Aura was a huntress of Artemis who was like, "You must not really be a virgin because you have like a feminine body. Like, I'm totally a virgin because because she was like, I don't know. But this really pissed Artemis off. So Artemis went to, I believe it was Eris. No, she went to Nemesis. So she was like, Nemesis, this girl needs to be punished. So Nemesis went to Dionysus and she did some whisperings. And while Aura was sleeping, Dionysus raped her. And then because of that, he impregnated her. And then, like, the punishment was losing her virginity. Oh, no. Sorry, let me backtrack. Artemis went to Nemesis, who went to Eros, who went to Dionysus. Nemesis decided that Aura's punishment would be losing her virginity. And she was like, Eros, you're going to make Dionysus fall in love with Aura. He did that. Dionysus drugs and rapes her, and she bore 2 sons. One of them, this, like, drove Aura into madness. She ate one of her sons, and then Artemis took the other before she could do that and, like, raised him. Very tragic story. Very insane. Now, the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. I love this temple. It was one of the wonders of the ancient world. It is so sick. It was one of the biggest temples. Huge. It went through a lot. It was, like, reconstructed a few times. It was, like, taken over a little bit. Just so much happened to it. It's amazing. Huge temple. This was, like, a pilgrimage site, sorry. And these young girls would, like, travel all the way to like, they'd spend, like, 2 years there, like, becoming Artemis girlies, or, like, getting maidenhood or something. Now, Artemis forms this very unique trio with Hecate and Selene. The way this works is Hecate represents the underworld, Selene represents the heavens, and Artemis represents the land. This also works of Hecate's the moon. It's like this whole thing, and Hecate and Selene both have this association with the moon. Selene's the goddess of the moon. And that's partly where Artemis gets this moon association from. And it's also, like, magic, something else, and something else. It's just a very interesting triad. Trios don't exist in Greek mythology. Triads do. Now, Demeter, I have so few slides on her because so much of her mythology is Persephone, and I didn't want to talk a lot about Persephone for Demeter because that's not who Demeter is. But Demeter is the goddess of agriculture. To the Romans, she is Ceres. She's the mother of Persephone. And because of Persephone, she has a strong association with the underworld. General mythology, she is the constellation. She, like, helps represent the constellation Virgo. And then a flower of hers is the poppy, because underworld stuff. Poseidon came on to Aphrodite, and they, like, either slept together or he raped her, and then she had a horse. No. Poseidon was coming on to her, and she was like, I'm gonna be a horse, so you're not gonna sleep with me. He also turned into a horse. I'm not sure if he raped her then, or if they slept together. Anyway, for a horse that I forget the name of, but famous horse, I believe. The Eleusinian Mysteries were were this huge festival for Artemis for Demeter and Persephone. And as the name suggests, we don't know a lot about them. They're a mystery, but they were this big deal, big thing, huge thing. She's the mother of Persephone, and because of this, she has a dual life and death aspect. The Eleusinian Mysteries were part of that association with Persephone. Just really insane. And that is the Olympian Goddesses. Thank you so much.